Hello everybody, thank you for joining me for today's podcast episode. I'm extremely tired, so please forgive me for that if I'm... Hi everybody, thank you for joining me for today's podcast episode, and thank you so much to everybody who has supported the podcast so far. I am having a little bit of trouble with my tripod stand where it keeps sliding down, so if things seem to be a little bit distracted at any point, it's just because I'm trying to figure out what's going on with that. I'm also super tired, as I'm sure you can imagine from my announcement last week of my pregnancy. Is my baby at 12-week scan, which was a little while ago now. So yes, that's what's going on with me. Quick announcement before we get into today's episode. I'm going to be changing the frequency that I put the episodes out. This is because doing the editing is getting a little bit stressful because it's quite time consuming. Now, it's not the editing itself, it's the software that I use. It's not particularly fast with the export when I've finished editing a video. And so I can batch record a load of videos in one session, and that's great, but I can't batch edit the videos. So to try and make things work in a little bit more time effective way, I'm going to try doing 3 Fridays out of the month and then having a break, and then 3 Fridays and having a break, and see how that goes. And if I find that it's still a bit too much, I'll try something else. I knew that this would be a bit of a teething issue when I got started. I knew that it would be time consuming, so it's not that I didn't think that it would be and that this is a surprise or anything, but it is just taking a little bit longer than I thought it would. I don't know if I'm using the best software. What I wanted was simple and straightforward. I tried a couple that were a little bit too overcomplicated for what I needed. This tripod is starting to slide down. But I tried a couple that were a bit too overcomplicated. Now, I do have training in video editing, so it's not just training, I have a degree that involves video editing. So it's not a case that I don't know how to use those kinds of softwares. It's that I don't need all of those extra bells and whistles. I just need something really basic and straightforward. So I found something that I quite like, how it edits and what I can do on it, but it's just very slow when it comes to the saving and exporting and uploading of things. So we'll see how that goes, and I'll continue to investigate software that I could be using that might work a little bit better. And today's episode is going to be the Q&A session that I've been talking about. So on my Instagram stories, I've been sharing a little question box, and I've had some really great questions sent in. If your question doesn't get answered on today's session, it's just a case that I have saved it for a future session because I'm building up a little bank of questions, but I've got about 5 questions. Well, I've got 4 audience questions or 4 listener questions to answer, and I've actually got a question for you guys to answer as well. So I'm really excited about that. So I asked you to send in questions that could be anything about hypnobirthing, childbirth, pregnancy, parenting, anything related to what I am talking about and what I do for my business, my career. And so I've got a good variation of questions here that I'm really excited to get into. So the first question that I've got all my questions just here to the side of me, so the question is not birth related, but do you, find it different being a mum to a girl versus a boy? Okay, so this follower has seen on Instagram that I have got one of each. So I've got a 6-year-old boy and a 4-year-old girl. So I just want to start this by saying that I try very hard to avoid stereotypes between boys and girls. Some of what I'm saying is coming from my own experience with my own 2 children, and the other is some of what I'm saying is coming from conversations I've had with friends who've also got a boy and a girl. I understand that every single child is different, and that it's not always the case that that girls go one way and boys go another way. That's absolutely, fine. But my experience is that boys tend to be a little bit more laid back and will rely on you for a little bit longer to do things for you, and girls are a little bit more intense and they want to learn how to do things themselves as quickly as possible. Now, that's just generally speaking, and again, like I say, from conversations that I've had with the kids' friends' parents or my own friends who've got one of each. Again, I know that this can just differ from child to child. Each child is their own little person and their own little personality. So, my experience though is that my son is laid back, he does have quite big emotions, he is quite happy for me to do as much as possible for him, and he would much rather have fun than learn how to do something new. So if I can combine him having fun and learning how to do something new, then that is brilliant. My daughter loves to follow rules, loves to make rules, will learn something as fast as possible so that she can say she knows how to do it, and is quite intense. I love them both. They've both got their own little quirks. Now, what I would say is, I think that you go into parenting. I went into parenting certainly thinking I will parent my children in a certain way. We all have, an ideal in mind about how we will parent our children, about what kind of parent we will be. But I think it largely depends on the child, and that every child is different regardless of if they're a girl or a boy. So I do think that I parent my children slightly differently, but whether or not it's because they're a girl and a boy and are so different, or whether that would be the same if they were a girl and or a boy and a boy, I don't know, because they could still be a boy and a boy, but could have totally different personalities and requirements. I suppose I'll find out come December. To answer your question a little bit more specifically, though, I would say yes, I do parent them differently. My girl requires much less hands-on attention for things like giving her a task to do. I know that for the most part, she can sit and focus on that task without any assistance from me. Whereas with my son, I do have to tend to check in and, remind him what he needs to be doing. I do know that if I say to my daughter, can you go into the next room and bring me this item that I need, she'll go and come back with it, whereas he will go and either get distracted or won't be able to find it. Similarly though, I know that I could take him to a birthday party or a friend's house and probably not see him again for the whole time I'm there, except for the occasional visit for him to tell me that he needs the toilet or ask if he can have something to eat. Whereas with my daughter, if I take her into a social situation, she needs much more support. She is getting better at that, and we've got a couple of friends' houses that we go to where she's quite happy to even come and ask the other parent for things and not necessarily even speak to me. Bedtimes are different for both of them. My daughter will have her stories and get straight into bed, but she might shout at us a couple of times. My son will like to have a long conversation when he gets into bed. That's his time that he opens up about feelings or something that might have happened at school that he hasn't wanted to talk about, or he just starts asking really philosophical questions. So his bedtime takes a bit longer, but then he very rarely needs anything once he's in bed. But if he does need something, you can guarantee he's going to need a lot of things, and he's not going to tell me about them all in one go. So they are different, and I do parent them differently. I do find that I have to be a bit stricter with my son than my daughter because she just takes things straight away. But also she cries a lot more. So if I raise my voice or speak in an annoyed tone, or even just say, no, please don't do that, she's quite likely to cry and say, I don't like getting told off. Whereas my son will either just not listen or he'll stop doing what I've asked him to stop doing. So I do have to manage their emotions differently. But again, I don't know if this is because they're a girl and a boy, and so that's different, or if it's because they're just different people. And I could have had two boys that could have been this, gone the same way. I don't know. Okay, question number 2. Any ideas on how to incorporate your firstborn to get them included or excited? It says the firstborn is 3 years old. So my assumption here is that this person is having another baby and they've already got a 3-year-old. So my biggest ideas about this is, first of all, talk to them openly and honestly, as appropriate as you feel it is for that age. I have got a 6-year-old and a 4-year-old, and I am talking to them about this pregnancy as honestly as I can. I don't want them to feel frightened. I want them to feel included. I want them to know that all of the pregnancy symptoms are normal. I want them to understand that for me, like, how the birth of this baby will happen. And so I am just being open and honest with them as best as I can without some areas, without going into too much detail, because they're just not emotionally ready for that, I don't think. Number 2 is talk to them about baby things. So, like, they've seen the photo of the scan a lot. We've got a little box behind me where the kids can put in things that they own that they want to give to the baby. So, like, my son has picked this little owl puppet. He says that he wants to give this to the baby. My daughter's put in a pair of slippers that she found that were hers a while ago, and a pair of, like, socks that are too small for her. So they've got a thing. We reuse a lot of stuff, and I've explained to them that we pass down items, and so they're trying to keep things for the baby. My daughter also keeps drawing pictures for the baby. Talking to them about the baby, like, oh, you can talk to the baby, talking about what things that you'll do when the baby is born. So, like, we had sports day the other day, and I said to them, well, next year we'll be watching you both at sports day and we'll have the baby. So just to make them put that in their head that the baby is going to be there. Number 3, we got a fantastic book, which I haven't got upstairs, and I will do a review about at some point, but they're called Let's Talk to Mummy's Tummy, and there's 3 of them. So there's a week by week book for the kids that we read together, and each week it gives them an update on the baby and it asks them questions. So, for example, one of the weeks was talking about the baby's taste buds, and so it asked the question for the kids was what their favourite meals are, and there was a little box of them to draw the meal. And then there's a picture of the baby, and it tells them what fruit or vegetable size it is that week, and there's stickers. There's then an activity book that goes with it, and it kind of copies each week by week theme, but it gives them bits to draw, bits to fill out, more stickers, bits to colour in. And then there's a book for after the baby is born, and it's kind of like a baby book that they do. It goes for the first 2 years of the baby's life, so they've been really excited about that. So I think just generally just keeping them talking about what they can do as well once the baby's here. So I keep saying, are you going to help me change nappies? Are you going to help me do this? Are you going to help me feed the baby? All sorts. And talking about your emotions as well. So I've been very, very emotional this pregnancy, and I've been crying a lot, and making them understand that that's normal and it's okay, and that I kind of explained it as, when you're pregnant, your big feelings are even bigger and a little bit harder to control. And so it's just reassuring that while these things might seem odd or unusual, that that's okay. And I think that that's working really well. The children are both really excited. Of course, the age difference, between a 6 and a 3-year-old, or a 4 and a 3-year-old is quite something, but it's about tailoring it to your child. You know what your child is like, you know how they cope with things, and you know how much they are likely to understand. So it's about just taking that on board as well. Okay, next question. Do you have a particular philosophy around birthing? Wow, that's a big question. Well, I don't think, I like to think that I'm quite a philosophical person in some senses, but I'm also not really, if I think about it. My philosophy around birthing largely is that you should birth the way that feels right for you, whether that is in a hospital, whether that is having an assisted birth, whether that is having an elective caesarean, whether that is birthing at home, whether that is having a doula or an independent midwife rather than an NHS midwife or NHS staff, whether it is free birthing, whatever feels right for you, as long as you are aware of all of the risks and benefits, you've done your research, and you are happy and confident with it. That is my philosophy. I hope that answers that question. Questions like that are always a bit tough to answer, and I could probably talk a lot longer about that, to be honest, but I don't know if this is the time for it. Okay, so my final question before I ask you a question is, how can hypnobirthing help with an elective caesarean? That's a great question. I have got a course specifically for elective caesareans. Now, first of all, I just want to say that birth looks different for everybody. And one of the big misconceptions about hypnobirthing is that people are aiming for that, unmedicalized home birth with, candles and all of those things that people think of. I think they think of almost as like a goal birth. But actually, for me, hypnobirthing is about you, much as what I said for what my philosophy of birthing is. It's about you learning and preparing for the birth that feels right for you. And that can look different in so many different ways to so many different people. And it can be hospital births, home births, free births, doulas, independent midwives, NHS midwives, lots of medication, no medication, lots of assistance, no assistance. It's what's right for you. Are there certain ways to give birth that are more beneficial to the body? Certainly. Is that always what people want? No. Is that okay? Absolutely. One of the ways that birth might present itself is an elective caesarean. Now, this can be for lots of different reasons, and this can be decided at many different points in the birth. You may have a plan for a particular type of birth, and then at 40 weeks, you might decide, actually, an elective caesarean is the best option for me. You might go in from the very beginning wanting an elective caesarean. Again, all those differences, absolutely fine. How does hypnobirthing help with an elective caesarean then? Well, you might not be learning necessarily about the physiological side of birthing a baby, but you're certainly learning a bit about the process, so it takes that element of the unknown away. And I think sometimes the thought of going in for a caesarean is kind of clinical and cold and, very medicalized, because it's major surgery. And what we do see a lot of the time on the telly, of course, is emergency caesareans. And I'd just like to point out now that hypnobirthing is also beneficial for emergency caesareans, but that's not what the question is. So it's kind of taking that element away by sort of allowing you to understand that actually there's such thing as a gentle caesarean or a calm caesarean, but it's allowing you to create that positive experience, because just because you're having surgery to deliver your baby doesn't mean that you can't have that same really lovely positive experience with lots of oxytocin and lots of, love and the birth bubble that we're trying to create when you were giving birth vaginally. So it's teaching you things like where the little sensor pads that get put on that hooks you up to the machines, where they can be placed so that it makes immediate skin to skin possible. It's teaching you the importance of that immediate skin to skin even when you've just delivered the baby, through surgery. It's giving you the options that actually you can physically pull your baby out yourself. It's advising you, that breastfeeding is still possible, optimal cord clamping is still possible, all of the options that you would have, bar the actual physically birthing the baby through the vagina, are still there. And it's putting that into your preferences so that when the day comes, the people who need to be aware of it are aware of it. You know, music, low lighting, all of that is still possible. The only thing I would say is that sometimes with an elective caesarean, unfortunately, you do still have the battle to get those things, even if those are your preferences, but it's doable. It's definitely doable, and it's about having the conversations with the right people. And that's how hypnobirthing can help as well, because it can make you aware of those things. And if you think about it this way as well, you're going in for major, major surgery, and that is going to spike some anxiety in most people. Anxiety and oxytocin don't work together. And while you don't need the oxytocin to be powering your contractions to give birth, you need it for the bonding and the breastfeeding and, you know, just generally feeling great after birth. And so you need to learn how to calm the mind. And you might want to be distracted during your surgery. You might not. You might want to be fully in that moment, feeling everything that you can possibly feel, being totally aware. But you might want to be distracted. So learning some hypnosis techniques so you can get into a state of self-hypnosis could also be incredibly beneficial. And also, these techniques help you with those early stages of parenting. Actually, they help you with the late stages of parenting as well. So, again, for things like breastfeeding, bottle feeding, keeping calm, you know, coping with the night feeds, things like that, it's going to really help there as well. So, if you were thinking of having an elective caesarean, you want to know more about elective caesareans, I do have a course just for that. What I would say is, even if you were planning a vaginal birth, having a plan for a caesarean is really beneficial, because whether or not you have an emergency caesarean or late on in your pregnancy you actually decide an elective caesarean is going to be the better option, having that plan already made means that you've made those decisions and it takes away some of the stress of the change. Okay, so I said I had a question for you. One listener sent in I do know this person, so I know exactly where this question has come from. Crocs and pregnancy, the comfort. Now, I don't particularly like Crocs. I know they're very popular at the moment. I do have garden shoes, which look a little bit like Crocs. I think, I'm not sure if she wanted to know my opinion on Crocs in pregnancy, but I can't give it because I've never worn Crocs in pregnancy. So I wanted to find out what the audience thought. So my question to you, listeners, viewers, followers, is, are Crocs comfortable in pregnancy? Do they make life easier in pregnancy, or did you find them not helpful at all? So if you've worn Crocs during pregnancy, I want to know about it. So on Spotify, there is a little question box below the audio information, so you can answer in there. If you're watching on YouTube, pop your answer in the comments or send me a message on Instagram and I'll share it with everybody. Okay, so that was our first Q&A session. It's been a bit of a longer episode than normal. I've really enjoyed answering the questions. Sometimes I get a little bit distracted and go a little bit on a tangent, and I've tried very hard not to do that, but that is also part of just who I am. And so that was that. I'll do another one maybe in August. I'm not sure. I'm trying to think what the best frequency of doing them, if every other month is better. And you know, in the meantime, if you think of any questions, drop me a message and I'll save them for when the time comes around. And yeah, that'll be fun. That was really great. I hope you've enjoyed my answers. I'd love to know if you have any answers to go with the questions as well. So again, feel free to pop it in the comments if you do, or drop me a message if you have got any of your own answers. So thank you for joining me today, and I will see you all again very soon.